Hey, it's Drybear. We just finished our video going over the class popularity in Season 1 for Dragonflight PvE. If you're looking for that, a link will be down in the description, and this is just focusing on the popularity, how often classes are being played in endgame content. And in that, it brought up the idea of, well, regardless of popularity, what classes are doing the best? Like, who's the strongest? Who's performing the highest? Who is the most reliable when it comes to endgame content? So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at Mythic Plus and Raid. I think PvP is a whole other thing that we'll look at in different videos. But for this, we'll look at which classes are the best, which ones are dominating the meta for Mythic Plus and Raid. If you have any questions for me, comment down below if any of these surprise you, or if they're right what you expect them to be, or if your class is here and you want it to be higher or maybe lower. Put it down in the comments down below. If you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. Let's start with Mythic Plus. So this is the current the Raider.io leaderboard for Mythic Plus. And we'll start with tanks, because I think tanks are a good place to start for Mythic Plus. They do the routing, they're able to pull in the mobs, they're able to survive. The bigger a pull a tank can survive, the higher key that you can do, right? If they can hold a bunch of mobs in place for an extended period of time where the damage can come through and decimate them, those are the tanks that you're gonna pick. So this is, we'll go through a couple categories here. So we'll start with tank, and let's look at all Mythic Plus levels. This is anyone doing a key at all, period. Here are the tank lineup. Protection Warriors, way at the top. And you'll see as we push higher to plus 20 and beyond, Protection Warriors are almost exclusively used. Every now and then you'll see other tanks. They're just the strongest right now. It's hard to argue anything against that. They do a lot, they survive a lot, they have a lot of buttons, they're very powerful. The number 2 slot goes to Vengeance Demon Hunter. And I think in a wide swath, this also isn't too surprising. The Demon Hunter has always been a very popular class and is still very effective, but also quite good in Mythic Plus. They have some really interesting sigils, silences, interrupts, and they have some good stuns, controls, things like that that allow them to excel. And things get interesting in the middle here. So you kind of have Protection Paladin, the Blood DK, and the Guardian Druid about the same. However, if you're looking at all Mythic Plus levels, Guardian Druid is in 3rd, then Protection Paladin, then Blood DK. As we raise the difficulty level, you'll see in a second, this will shift around. And the last one is Brewmaster Monk. Just in all Mythic Plus keys completed in the first opening week, Brewmaster is is actually what, a 6th of Protection Warrior. So for every, if you did 7 Mythic Pluses, you'd see 6 Protection Warriors and 1 Brewmaster relative. So that's kind of how that comparison is. It's rough. I think that they do excellent damage. They're much more complicated to play. They have a lot of buttons. They're always, like, every GCD, even OGCDs for Brewmasters are being constantly utilized. So maybe people just prefer having aggro, watching their teammates rather than trying to manage a more complicated rotation. But it gets interesting. So let's start moving up in difficulty. Let's say we go M+10 and up, which isn't quite yet to the level of, basically every tank, every spec in the game can do +15 for Keystone Master. Getting to 20 is a huge push, and then only certain specs can push past 20 generally, and your world first keys that go 27 to 30 are only the best specs in that lineup. But you can see as we push higher, the Protection Warrior only gets more prevalent. It went from, what, 29% to 34%, so 5% total relative increase or overall increase of the total spectrum. Vengeance Demon Hunter has kind of held on to that. You can see that Guardian Druid and Protection Paladin have come down in usage a good bit, and that's not too surprising. I think that Protection Paladin is a little bit too squishy, and Guardian Druid is a little bit too limited in what they're able to employ. And the self-sustain, and this is crucial in Mythic Plus, the self-sustain in Blood DK surpasses these other 3. And that's great because if the tank can keep themselves alive, the healer can do damage. And if you can do damage, more damage, whether they're a healer or not, you can finish the dungeon faster, you can finish the key, you can time it. So the more the tank can be self-sufficient, the more damage the healer can do. So as we push higher and higher, if we go to 15 and up, we can see that getting even more extrapolated. As we push to 15 and up, 41% protection warrior. And you can see actually Guardian Druid coming up a little bit more. They have some nice damage options here. They got a 50% damage buff at the end of the beta. So just something to think about. And then as we push to 20 and up, which there's not really, there's only been like a few plus 20s, but it's almost all protection warriors. And we've seen that trend kind of continue on. But that's the efficacy there. I would say that in general, the 15 and up is probably what you would use for a power metric. So protection warrior are just insanely strong. I would say Vengeance, Guardian, and Blood DK for Mythic Plus are about the same. And really you just pick the better player at that point. I don't think there's a meaningful difference between these when it comes to high keys. And then at the very bottom, Protection Paladin and Brewmaster. I would even put this lower percentage on Brewmaster just being because monks are less popular in general, but I think Protection and Brewmaster are on the docket to get buffs. Moving on to healers for Mythic Plus. This one is very similar to the popularity, as you might expect. Resto Druid dominating, and then Preservation Evoker also dominating the top two. This is going to be across the board. Not only do they have the highest throughput, but they also just have incredible mobility, flexibility. You have like double Spirit Walker's Grace, good movement, large AoEs that you can duplicate. There's a lot, like, I think the longer we play Preservation Evoker, the more depth we find in just Echo, being able to duplicate your abilities. As you min-max and get more proficient with that, you can do some serious bonus, especially in 5-man content. And then from there, it's just kind of like a free-for-all a little bit. You're seeing these just dominate Mythic Plus, and then down towards the bottom, the next one is going to be a Holy Priest. And this is for all Mythic Plus levels. Again, we'll see this change as we go higher in difficulty. I think this is just Holy Priest being popular and having some nice changes. It's kind of shocking to see Disc lower, being the lowest actually out of all of them across the board of all players playing Mythic Plus. Yeah, Holy Priest. I love Holy Priest. I love playing them. They're just too squishy. Holy Paladin. I think you will see some changes here as we go up in difficulty. I still maintain that it is Resto Druid, Preservation Evoker, then Holy Paladin for Raid or Mythic Plus. Holy Paladin is still incredibly strong and beats out all three of these specs. But when you look at all Mythic levels, they're down underneath Holy Priest. Then we have Resto Shaman down to Mistweaver, and then Discipline. And again, I think Discipline is mostly just a throughput problem. I think they're just undertuned, and so they just can't heal as you'd expect. So let's check this out as we move up. So level 10 and up, as we see the difficulty change, we can see that Resto Shaman dropping a far margin. The Holy Paladin coming up a bit. Still winning is Resto Druid and Preservation Evoker. It's going to be that way. This honestly will probably, unless we see major changes, I will see these two in the first two slots for the majority, if not all of Season 1. Mistweaver falling down more, Disc kind of maintaining. So actually, Mistweaver, as difficulty goes up, and this is what I'm seeing as well in my my keys, is I actually, like, I've made a Mistweaver for a long time. I'm considering not in this first season just because it feels really rough to try and heal difficult content on Mistweaver. You can have comparable throughput to the other specs, but your mana doesn't last, and then your options are quite limited. So Restored Shaman coming down as we go up in difficulty, Holy Paladin coming up. Shockingly, Holy Priest is still holding on, but as the difficulty goes up, we'll go to 15 plus. We can see that Preservation went down slightly, and some of that percentage has gone over to Holy Priest and Holy Paladin. There's great damage, like Fire Breath plus the talent that allows you to send out like 5+ Living Flames is super strong. A lot of good bursts there. Resto Druid still about what it is, like kind of unchanged. Holy Priest, Holy Paladin going up as you go up in difficulty. Disc Priest staying about the same, and then Resto Shaman and Mistweaver as you go up in difficulty, getting less and less and less picked. And yeah, I think there's just gonna be there's just a question here. I think Disc needs a bonus in throughput. Otherwise, their kit is fine. There's not really anything wrong with Disc. I think they're just not healing for enough. And then there's just some questions on these two specs on how they might be functioning in Mythic Plus. Moving on to melee DPS. This one is interesting. So this is all Mythic Plus levels. I think Havoc, Demon Hunter, and Fury Warrior are going to take the cake the whole way through. In fact, this is quite similar to the popularity, and it would make sense that all Mythic Plus levels, without any difficulty factored in, would match closer to popularity in general, because people are choosing what they like rather than what is strong. So Havoc, Demon Hunter, then into Fury Warrior, Windwalker Monk, and then we have Outlaw Rogue as well. And we'll see some of these shift around. Unholy kind of holding a good middle ground alongside Feral and Retribution. We are seeing Enhancement Shamans being quite popular this expansion, which is pretty cool. It's awesome. We do like to see that. And then bottom of the barrel, Frost DK, Assassination and Subtlety Rogue, and then Survival Hunter down at the very, very bottom. But let's raise the difficulty to see how the specs are doing from then on. So we'll do 10 and up just to see how that changes the distribution. You can see the Outlaw Rogues climbed a good bit. As difficulty shot up, Fury Warriors went down. Windwalker is now the second most popular over Fury Warrior by 5%. Havoc Demon Hunters only went higher. Super valuable. I like calling Havoc Demon Hunters the trash mob heroes. They are very good at clearing trash and big pulls. Lots of really good timed AoE. Then Windwalker in second place, then Outlaw, and then Fury Warrior. So comment down below why you think Fury Warriors lose as difficulty goes up. And then we see Enhancement Shaman staying about the same. Retribution falling dramatically. As difficulty goes up, Retribution is losing pretty hard. And then you can see everything else is basically the same. Unholy kind of sitting down here with Feral. And then your bottom is Frost, Assassination, and Subtlety. What is interesting is as difficulty goes up, Subtlety has overtaken Frost DK and Assassination. And then Survival Hunter only got worse. Unlucky. Going to 15 and up, as we kind of push towards Keystone Master, we can actually see that some of these specs have disappeared entirely. So let's go to 10 and up, and you can see that Survival Hunter is barely surviving at 0.4%. When we go to 15, Survival Hunter has disappeared entirely. So there have been no Survival Hunters in the world that have yet to complete and submit a plus 15 or higher in Dragonflight. Pour one out for my dead homies. And again, as the difficulty goes higher, Fury Warrior dropping down so low. Demon Hunter only went higher. And then as we get to 15 and up, Outlaw Rogues has taken the first slot. So Outlaw Rogues, as high difficulty exists, that is there. There's a couple reasons for this. One, they're just doing super good. They have very reliable AoE. They have strong single target, but also, Rogues allow you to. There is a lockpick skip in Neltharis. You can do shroud skips. They're able to do some really cool CC options, which can be really useful, and especially this week where it's fortified, raging, and those two combinations together make trash more important this week. Then you can see those jump up. Frost DKs have fallen off almost entirely. Ret Paladins are about to fall off and become endangered. Feral Druids have fallen down hard. Enhancement Shamans have absorbed all of the tiers of the specs that are around them. Windwalker's holding strong, and so right now you can pretty much see that for high keys in the first week, Havoc Demon Hunter, Windwalker, Outlaw Rogue, Fury Warrior, and Enhancement Shaman are the go-tos. Everything else is not statistically high enough to say that they are being picked regularly, but it is early, so we'll see how that progresses. And finally, we have ranged DPS. So we're going to start again with all Mythic Plus levels. This is every Mythic Plus key completed in the world. Here we have the stats. Again, as we know, since this isn't really factoring in difficulty, it's going to most closely represent popularity, which you'll see in the other video that I did. The number one slot goes to Demonology, which is pretty accurate to what we'd expect. Interestingly enough, though, separate from raid and general popularity, Beast Mastery Hunter takes the second spot over the Devastation Evokers. Beast Mastery is just, it's so good right now. It's so effective. Hunters are super popular in general, so that it is kind of shocking to see that. But your top three are Demonology, Beastmaster, and Devastation. In that fourth slot is going to be Marksman, and I think that Blizzard's probably pretty happy they did that damage buff right before Season 1 started for marksmanship. And then in the middle, you have a couple specs kind of just hanging out together. Shadow Priest, Elemental Shaman, Frost Mage, Arcane Mage, and Balanced Druid. I would clump together in the same statistical allotment, just because they generally have good efficacy, good performance. There's actually some cool things you can do with Priest now, since they have Void Shift in their class tree. They even have some heals and stuff like that that can be pretty cool. Elemental Shaman has, I think, more AoE than they've had, at least in Shadowlands. They didn't really have any reliance on Venthyr like Enhancement did, but they have some really good ways to spend their Maelstrom now. Arcane and Frost doing good in Mythic Plus, and then towards the bottom, the struggle buses are Destruction Warlock, Affliction Warlock, and Fire Mage. We see Affliction and Fire Mage at the bottom about equal in popularity, and then we see Destruction towards the bottom as well. But let's see how that changes when we start mixing in actual difficulty. So let's go 10 plus and see how those change. We can see that Demonology only got stronger, and then we see that Marksmanship for Mythic Plus has overtaken Beast Mastery, and they're just super good. They have great single target if they spec for it. They have excellent AoE if they spec for it, so not too surprising there. Devastation Evoker has come down, and then as you push higher keys, balance has been overtaken by Arcane Mage. I was about to say, for the popularity here, it's kind of shocking to see Frost be over Arcane, just because Arcane is doing better, but as you can see, when we change it and we make the difficulty different, Arcane takes it over. Elemental drops significantly, and then you can see that Affliction and Fire Mage are neither of them are even holding an entire percent. They're falling super far down. So they definitely need some buff. They need some kind of some bonus, but we'll see what they decide to do with that. And then we'll round it up with 15 and up. Let's see kind of where things line up for that. So we have Marksmanship taking even higher, super strong in Mythic Plus. I'm actually shocked to see balance lower here. I think people are running like Outlaw Rogue, Marksman Hunter, and then like a Demo Lock or a Windwalker Monk, just to kind of make things fit together as a perfect combo. And then you just get a Protection Warrior and one of the two best healers, Resto Druid or Devastation. And that way, because you can now do the Bloodlust with the Evoker, or you can do the Battle Res with the Druid, then you can just focus on pure damage coming out with the other ones, the other specs. And if you do Outlaw Rogue Windwalker, you have really repeatable interrupts. And then, either Warlock or Hunter, you can get some really good AoE and reliable cooldowns. So that's kind of where we sit for range DPS overall. Let's move on to Raid and talk about where those classes are sitting. And this time we'll use Warcraft logs and just look at the parses and start sorting through the data a little bit on which of the classes are doing well. Disclaimer for this one in general is that it is difficult. It is very difficult to be able to quantify the value of a tank or a healer through parses. Mainly because, self-healing is one thing, but mitigation isn't always calculated. Sometimes healers can, one gets their cooldown off in general in a right window, or, if there's not enough healing going around or whatever. Based on the encounter, heal logs are very wishy-washy in being equivocal to how good they are, and same for tanks. So we'll start with the easy one to discuss, which is going to be the DPS, right? This is kind of just DPS live and breathe on parses. They live and breathe on their DPS output. And this is going to be all specs put together into one. So this is, we'll start with the same thing we did with Mythic Plus. We'll start with a wide swath, and then we'll start zooming in as difficulty increases and see how those specs change. So you can see that performance-wise, so if you're wondering what this is going to be your score for DPS output on damage. And one thing to keep in mind is this bar here is super useful because it tells you the variance. If these bars are thin, and the difference here between the end of the bar and the dot outside of the outlier, it means that there's generally more skill ceiling because a class is more complicated, and so the lowest parse is further away from the highest parse, which means there's more room for skill expression. Whereas if the bars are really small, so something like a machinist in Final Fantasy XIV, it can be very, straightforward, and it's more just about being there and hitting your shots, kid, rather than, more of a skill stealing difficulty. So looking at normal raid difficulty first, all percentiles. So normal is just basically anyone can do. Everyone and their mother is doing normal right now. It's very available. and the difficulty requirement is much lower. And it's also people that may be, playing more gear, that sort of thing. But let's look at this as a baseline for us on what could be the case. So at the top, you can see all 3 rogue specs, very high performing. High DPS output, very strong usage, and then marksmanship hunter also lining up in that thread, which shouldn't be too surprising. I think when anyone can super buff themselves, there's even situations where people can cheese logs as well. They can get to a point where they they super buff one person and then get them high logs. But this is a wide swath of a general population. Rogue doing quite well. We'll see in a second how that changes towards the higher percentiles and higher difficulties. Going lower than that, we have Windwalker Monk, Enhancement Shaman, Arcane Mage, Fury Warrior. Nothing surprising about those. I'm shocked to see Elemental Shaman as high as it is here, even in the general population, just because they haven't been performing as well, but they've been performing decently enough. Ret Paladin, you can see, has one of the biggest variances. So there are some very good Ret Paladins and there are some very bad Ret Paladins. Comment down below if this is something that you've experienced. Balanced Druid and Feral Druid about middle of the pack, and Havoc Demon Hunter about middle of the pack as well. So this one is kind of indicative, I think, a little bit of popularity and maybe even cheese strats as we see things move up, because Havoc generally is going to be a lot higher than some of the others, which is pretty cool. And then you have, moving down, we have Frost DK being higher than Unholy DK for raid normal. Anyone's allowed a full swath. Devastation dropping lower, Beast Mastery, and even Survival's up here. That's how you know that something's amiss. Shadow Priest down to Destruction Warlock, Arms Warrior, Affliction Warlock, and then Frost and Fire Mage. But that is all swaths. Let's raise that up a little bit to not just like everyone and anyone playing. Let's start with a 50th percentile, which cuts out the bottom. It kind of just like removes basically everyone that's average or below parses gets removed, and now we're just talking about 50th and up. Marksmanship Hunter takes the cake here, and this is across all bosses in Vault of the Incarnate. And then Assassination Rogue, Outlaw Rogue, Subtlety Rogue, Enhancement Shaman, about the same. The only thing we're seeing here is we're seeing Arcane Mage shift quite a bit. Demonology starting to come up a little bit. Beast Mastery starting to come up a little bit. Ret Paladin coming down. Havoc going down further. So let's see if we can go up to 75th percentile and see what changes there. Assassination Rogue coming up even higher. And let's just take it all the way, actually. Let's do 99th percentile. And yeah, I guess it didn't change much there either. So shockingly, when it comes to normal Vault of the Incarnate, with just that basic difficulty, even Law of Large Numbers, taking every parse across the board, the highest performers are pretty accurate for what this is. I think for normal raids, this is about right. That rogues can really outshine. I'm shocked to see Subtlety as high as it is. Arcane Mage sitting up there as well. Frost DK doing decently. Enhancement Shaman, Elemental Shaman, Demonology, Retribution coming up a bit. But as I'm starting to suspect, this might be, this is kind of just like an interesting measurement. Let's jump up and rather than having the highest performers in normal difficulty, let's jump up to Heroic and see how those folks are doing. So as we go into raids here for Heroic, we can even just go to 50th percentile and just see generally how people are performing. And it's actually not that dissimilar. Survival Hunter is doing okay with over the last few days. So this is kind of disparate, but this is not at all what I expected to see. Frost Mage, Fire Mage quite low. Arcane Mage doing quite well. I suspect that would come up quite a bit when we go into the higher percentiles. Survival Hunter still sitting up with Marksman. Beastmaster being lower in Raid. They're dominating in Mythic Plus, and they're super popular, but not so much as Marksmanship here when we're looking at heroic kills of bosses inside of Vault of the Incarnate. So let's move up that percentile yet again, and we're going to look at this, and we're going to see Assassination, Subtlety, Outlaw, Enhancement still sitting at the top. Marksman, as you go higher and higher percentiles, is starting to drop. Destruction and Affliction and Frost and Fire are towards the bottom. Shadow Priest towards the bottom. Arms Warrior beating out all 5 of those specs. Beast Mastery has fallen. Frost DK climbing in Raid. Fury Warrior has fallen quite a bit as well. Havoc Demon Hunter, as difficulty increases, has started to climb up from normal. But this is, there's actually some shocking things in here that I didn't really expect to see for DPS in Raid. I know we only have a couple days of stats, but something to look at. Let's look at 95th percentile to see how these jump around. Subtlety, Outlaw, and Assassination are in 1, 2, and 3. So rogues are just, rogue believers are just, they're rich. They're reigning in it. They're feeling it. But as you can see, higher percentile on Heroic. Windwalker is still holding. Arcane, as I mentioned, is starting to climb up as people play that. Retribution climbing a lot in the highest percentile in Heroic DPS. Elemental Shaman climbing a good bit as well. Frost DK has fallen some. Fury Warrior staying about the same. Demonology sitting up. Havoc Demon Hunter about the middle. And then Balance has come down to just below or equal to Feral at the highest percentiles. And then Devastation Evoker falling off as well. Unholy DK, Destruction Warlock, Affliction Warlock. Affliction Warlock actually beating out Arms Warrior. And Survival Hunter, as we go to higher percentages, is starting to drop down as well. And yet again, we have Frost and Fire Mage down at the bottom. Not feeling too good. Let's try 99th percentile. See if that jumps up. As we go even higher, Enhancement climbs. Arcane climbs even more. Marksmanship stays about the same. Windwalker about the same. Retribution still holding on to their spot. Havoc has climbed as we go that extra 4% points towards the middle. Fury drops even more. Balance came up over Feral. Unholy towards the bottom middle. Same with Devastation. But Destruction and Shadow Priest climbing up with the higher percentile of performance. And Frost coming up a little bit as well. But Affliction, Survival, Fire Mage is going to be there. So I think without reliable mythic logs for the most part, and it being the first few days, this is about as wild and crazy as I figured it would be. But it's exciting and interesting to see how the damage in Raid is actually quite different from Mythic Plus, even in just these first few days. Now let's move on to tanks, and this gets a little bit more complicated in how to compare how their performance is in Raid based on parses. We've already looked at popularity, but we can see that damage output is a good metric to start with. Tanks that do more damage end up being picked more in harder content because then they can kill faster. And we know tanks can contribute relatively significant amounts of DPS. So Protection Warrior, still the top. They're going to be the top in everything. It's just the way that it is. But for damage output specifically, this is just one metric, one lens to look through. Guardian Druid and Vengeance Demon Hunter taking second and third. Brewmaster in Raid being fourth. Protection Paladin, and then Blood DK. So in general, we're not seeing a lot of damage coming out of Blood DKs relative to other tanks. But then let's look at healing, which looks like this. And that's exactly what I was expecting to see. When we saw Blood DK on the bottom of the damage meters, I was like, okay, well, hold on. Something else is going on here. So Blood DK going to be jumping at the highest. Now, again, this is why I don't like doing this or using this as a single metric, but this is super misleading, right? Because Blood DK, like you see a lot of damage reduction towards the bottom here, and you have a lot of self-healing towards the top here. Like absorbs from Brewmaster, Guardian, a lot of self-regeneration. And then you have Blood DK just has tons of self-healing. So you can't look at this metric and say that, Blood DK is the best tank, especially since you have Protection Warrior towards the bottom, but you compare this with everything else going on, as well as usage rate to really compare. So I would say that in general, for Raid, you probably just have Protection Warrior, Vengeance Demon Hunter, and Blood DK at the top. Then you have, kind of Guardian, Protection Paladin, and Brewmaster fighting in the tier right below that, right? So you have that kind of separation, but looking at both those metrics can be helpful. Now let's look at healers. This one's a little bit easier than tanks to quantify because healing throughput does matter. It's not the end-all be-all because there are certain things that healers can do outside of just throughput that can lead to the success of killing a raid encounter. But let's look at it this way. So this is Heroic Parses, week 1, first few days, 99th percentile. Preservation Evoker is at the highest. This one is, I was expecting to see Holy Priest here, not Preservation Evoker. But I guess here we are. We have Preservation Evoker, then Holy Priest. Holy Priest has always been the kings and queens. They are the masters of raid healing because they just have throughput out the wazoo. They're so, if you just made like a giant amphitheater full of people that need healing, Holy Priest is the one that you usually go through to get that done through almost all expansions, at least in recent memory. Holy Priest has always been in there. I'm shocked to see Restoration Shaman here. It might be worth actually kind of going through and actually doing individual log measurements on some of these. Comment down below if you'd like to see me go into more depth with each of these classes in DPS and healing. Tank would be a whole other discussion, but we could just look at these and just see, okay, where is this coming from? What spells are contributing to this, and why is that the case? Sometimes there's certain things that cause these to go up or down. Mistweaver is surprising, and I think when you look at the Race of the World first, we're seeing a lot of Holy Paladins, a lot of Holy Priests, and then like one Preservation Evoker and maybe one Mistweaver, and then yeah, kind of like that split there. I think as Raid gets more and more difficult, throughput-wise, Restoration Druid, although they are so powerful right now, they're not as sought after. They definitely have incredibly high popularity, but when it comes to the highest throughput performance, which again isn't the end all be all, Resto Druid starts to fall down. So if we put this down to like more wide swath data, it is completely unchanged. Okay, good. So we have Mistweaver Monk coming down slightly, but for the most part, these relative positions are about the same. We even see Preservation Evoker across the board, you know, more of a wider aggregate. If we do all percentages, maybe it changes. And it doesn't change very much. This is what we're seeing right now for Heroic Vault of the Incarnates for healers. And again, this isn't the you know, exactly what you need, right? So the way healing works in Raid is as you have different kinds of healed. You have Raid healers, which are typically Preservation Evoker, Holy Priest, Restoration Shaman, and a little bit like Restoration Druids, which is why I'm surprised to see it so low. Those are the people that worry about healing large amounts of people. And you have spot healers, which are really good at healing one person. Like if one person goes to 10%, but the whole raid is healthy. People like Holy Paladin, Mistweaver Monk can be quite good at this. Disc Priest can help out a lot with some really clutch shields as well. So the spot healers may have less overall throughput because they're healing less targets, but their role is just as important. Same thing goes for tank healing. To keep the tanks alive, you may have less overall HPS, but you would be contributing just as equally valuable amount to the raid overall for that bit there. So that is the PvE analysis for the first few days of Season 1. Comment down below if there's anything you'd like to hear more about or you have questions for me. Of course, if you have any questions, you want them answered live, come by my live stream, twitch.tv/Drybear. I'm live every single day. Come say hi, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. But that's all I got for today. Cheers, good luck. Hope you get good drops this week. Hope you fill out your vault, and I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.